Now to President Obama's historic plan to fight climate change, shaping up to be a cornerstone of his legacy. Today, he unveiled the most sweeping action ever taken in the U.S. to reduce carbon emissions.
Today, we're here to announce America's Clean Power Plan, a plan 2 years in the making, and the single most important step America has ever taken in the fight against global climate change. If we don't get it right, we may not be able to reverse. And we may not be able to adapt sufficiently. There is such a thing as being too late when it comes to climate change.
And the plan's goal is to make sure America isn't too late on climate change. It cuts greenhouse gas emissions, focuses on renewable energy, and establishes state-by-state targets for meeting goals. It calls for a 32% cut in carbon dioxide emissions from power plants by 2030. This is a major environmental issue, but it's also a social justice issue, impacting people in poor communities disproportionately. President Obama today called out critics who claim his plan would hurt low-income families.
We've got critics of this plan who are actually claiming that this will harm minority and low-income communities, even though climate change hurts those Americans the most, who are the most vulnerable. Today, an African-American child is more than twice as likely to be hospitalized from asthma. A Latino child is 40% more likely to die from asthma. So if you care about low-income minority communities, start protecting the air that they breathe and stop trying to rob them of their health care.
Polls show 64% of Americans support stricter limits on power plant emissions. The American people are ready to take action on climate change before it's too late. Joining me now is Tony Dokoupil, host of Greenhouse on Shift by MSNBC, and Charles Ogbon, CEO of Greening Forward, an environmental advocacy group. Thank you both for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Rev.
Tony, the Times called this the strongest action ever taken in the U.S. on climate change. What's your reaction to the plan?
Well, it's an accurate statement in the sense that no one has ever told power plants, no more, we're going to cap your emissions. So it's a big deal in that regard. But the question becomes immediately, does it go far enough? We were already reducing our carbon emissions toward 2030. And this plan looks like it's going to get us about 6% further. 6% is a much smaller number than 32%. If you look at how far we've already come, I don't know if he'd get the same standing ovations if he had a press conference and said, we're going to cut it by 6%. But that is the reality. It's only 6%. There's still a lot more work that needs to get done if we want to avoid the most catastrophic results of global warming, the things that scientists are warning the most about.
Now, Charles, you're 19 years old now. You started your group when you were just 12. Are younger voters leading the way on this issue?
From my experience of leading Greening Forward and working with young changemakers all across the country, the youth of today are ready for this sort of action. I see how young people get so disillusioned by whether the future holds any promise for us. But we need to be at this decision-making table, and I'm glad that the president has made a step forward that requires bold action.
You know, Tony, Senator Ted Cruz reacted to the president's plan yesterday before a group of wealthy conservative donors. Here's what he said.
In the last 18 years, there's been zero recorded warming. We've discovered that NOAA, the federal government agencies, are cooking the books. They're actually adjusting the numbers. It's been publicly reported. Enron used to do their books the same way.
Tony, cooking the books? Like Enron? I mean, how can Republican presidential candidates continue to deny one of the biggest crises of our time?
I mean, that is an unbelievable, scandalous lie, and I'm upset that Mike Allen didn't jump in and interrupt him. But the criticism that Republicans have offered of this plan, there is a kernel of truth. They say it's going to raise electric rates on families, and that's true. In the short term, most people's base rates, the thing you pay to the power company, will go up. But what they don't mention is that while you might pay a little bit more, you're going to save lives. You're going to save days of sickness in the long term. And it's a little bit of extra money, but we're talking about 60,000 lives that right now the EPA says if we do nothing, 60,000 people are going to die in extreme heat and die of heart attacks and asthma attacks. We can prevent that with a plan like this.
Charles, you know, a 2009 study from USC talks about the impact of the climate gap, which it defines the climate gap as, quote, the disproportionate and unequal impact the climate crisis has on people of color and the poor. Charles, President Obama talked about this today. How big an issue is the climate gap, and what can we do about it?
People of color already know that race matters when we talk about environmental issues, because race often determines where the trees are put in a community, where the landfills go, and even where most of the carbon pollution is. We already regulate arsenic, we already regulate mercury. We know that these toxins kill people. Carbon does as well.
It's a social justice issue, Tony, as well as an issue in terms of environment. How much do you think the American public gets that?
I think they're waking up to it now. I mean, there's a study that came out last year from the University of Minnesota that found no matter where you live in this country, every single state, every single county, every single city, doesn't matter where you live within those states, if you are non-white or low income, you are much more likely to be breathing in the poison from a coal plant than if you're white and you have some money in your pocket. And that is a true scandal. And I do think people are waking up to it because the president is repeating the point over and over again. He's going to keep doing it, according to his advisors.
You know, I've got to ask you this, Charles. You started at 11, and when I was reading your bio, I took it personally because I started very young in activism. I was youth director of a major civil rights group at 12. What drew you to this issue? What got you involved at 11 years old? What brought this home to you?
Well, actually, I had to do a service project in 5th grade, and my project was picking up litter. But soon I realized that the environmental issue is much greater than things about litter. But what I realized that it's more than just about saving the planet, it's truly about saving us. And President Obama hit that right on the mark when he talked about creating a future for his grandchildren. Some of the dire statistics that we hear in the news about climate change, my generation, I am going to be alive to see that actually happen. And so I see my peers excited about these bold steps forward.
It is about the youth and the future, and it's about an increasing problem right now. I would say that I'm very proud of you, but I hated that when I was a teenager and people would say that. So I would just say carry on.
I'm
Tony
proud of you.
All right, he said it. I am too, but I didn't say it. Tony and Charles,
thank you both.
thank you both for your time tonight, too.